So my name is Benny Soto. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, originally from the Bronx, the South Bronx. Born and raised, during the time of Son of Sam, birthplace of hip hop. Generally, a sort of hard place to grow up. Music was always present, during that time. You heard the music in the street, really, the sounds of salsa, the sounds of hip hop. That was present. People playing music loud out their windows. So there was always the presence of music that sort of took me away. I was always curious about the nuts and bolts of nightlife, sort of. I was always the guy that was walking into a club and wondering how that worked and looking at the lights and details, So I was always drawn to it, because I always knew it was sort of a show, kind of, where, you had the lights, the music, and then the people that went were, sort of the actors. And so I was drawn to that. If I had to name one moment where that changed everything, was when the day that I walked into the Paradise Garage, because I remember it vividly. I never forgot it, because it was that impactful, because everything that I experienced up to that moment wasn't on that level. So the level, the quality of the sound, the lighting, just the general vibe was very, very different and special, much more different than anything I had experienced up until that point. And so walking into that place really kind of was very formative for me. I think that after that, there was a moment where I guess my level of what I wanted to learn and how I wanted to experience music grew. Because it kind of opened doors, for me. I will say that I think currently there's a overuse of the word community. I think that back when we formed these communities, it wasn't so intentional as it was more survival. Let's not forget that, and I always have to say this, that when we think of house music and we think of a lot of disco, we have to give credit to people of color and gay people, because they were the pioneers of this music. We often forget that music and that sound and that community arose not out of this sort of like, oh, we're gonna form a community and, and be cool. I don't wanna oversimplify it, but I think back then it was more of a way to survive and express feelings and art and music and a form of expression for people of color and gay people that normally, especially back then, there weren't that many outlets. So that term of underground was a real way of life, because nobody wanted those groups, So I think that though the music, that sound, that community really came about as a way of a form of expression, it was more, I see it as a form of survival. There was no other gathering places. You went to the club. And I think it was sometimes under those conditions is when you have these sort of beautiful ways of expression, these art forms, these new sounds emerge. So I always like to give credit to those people. Not that I'm stuck there, but the reality is that often, right, especially now, since you mentioned, how do we think it's changed? I think like most things that come from the underground and bubble to the surface, things get commodified, they get homogenized, they get taken over and, get put through the corporate machine. And, how, let's call it white America, kind of figures out how to make money. And I'm not hating that. That's part of the world we live in, obviously. But I think it's important to really kind of stop and sort of recognize that, those sounds and that those voices came from a lot of pain. If you really think about it, and oppression. It's the same kind of voices you heard in church, right? So, I think there's a lot to be said about that. Manhattan became so expensive, and the real estate there, there used to be pockets of sort of warehouse areas where, like, maybe some areas where manufacturing stopped, or, these areas that were zoned commercial. And slowly over the years, as Manhattan real estate became more valuable, there's really wasn't much room for these clubs anymore, or definitely not club areas, right? I feel like Manhattan always, was dotted with clubs here and there. But as time went on, we all saw it happening. People were buying these like so crazy expensive, multi-million-dollar homes. And if, you're investing in that kind of real estate, most people wouldn't want a loud nightclub down the street that was, where you had, people kind of making noise and throwing up on your, close to your building. And so I think things got pushed to Brooklyn. And because, the spaces were here, the commercial areas are here. But even now, what's happened to Manhattan, it's happened certainly in this area, Williamsburg. We see this huge, I was gonna say we see it, but it's happened already. The gentrification is over. It's moving on to other areas. But what happened here in Williamsburg essentially was an extension of what happened in Manhattan. And, again, nightlife sort of led, it happens many times. Nightlife sort of leads the change. I don't think we do that intentionally, but it's what happens. People want to move in. It's cool. Restaurants, nightclubs, bars, young people. But in particular, this area, it happened very, very quickly. When we opened with Output, when Nicholas Matar opened Output, that was the first major club in that area. There was nothing over there. It was just Output and some empty lots and some smaller warehouses, and now it's like all hotels. And we saw it happening, and we saw it changing before our very eyes, and that change is continuing. So, I think it creates a lot of pressure on places like this to exist and do well. It's a complicated question, how I got here. I think I will say that, especially now, right, with being a DJ is so accessible, right? Because back then, if you wanted the music, you had to go to the record stores. People would go to the garage, but then they would go to Vinyl Mania and to other record stores to try to get the tracks and try to find out even what they were. Because some of that stuff was super exclusive. Maybe somebody like Larry Levan would get a test pressing and you would have to wait, right? Before. Now you just go anywhere. You have a dozen sites where you can download music, plus you have all the other sites where you can find anything in a high quality file even, right? So I think it's so accessible. And then you have YouTube. So if you want to learn how to DJ, you can just watch a few videos. If you want to learn how to beat match, if you want to learn how to produce, the information is there. I think for myself, how I became interested was I certainly had heard enough DJs in my lifetime. And because I was a promoter, I studied and I watched and I listened carefully to what my mentors and predecessors were doing, what people that I looked up to or that I thought had a certain vibe, I just thought, well, I can do that because I understand how music can be impactful. Not every track that you play is going to be impactful. Not every track that you play is going to be a track that everybody loves. But I learned from some of the greats that picking the tracks and how you put them together meant a lot more than how you mix them. And so I studied. I had to get over a lot of fears, of, what are people going to think? The truth is that I've been around it longer than most people. So when I thought about it, I was like, the other thing is that it's really interesting, but you become a DJ when you say you're a DJ. You're not getting a diploma. You're just putting together music and you're practicing and then you become a DJ. You say you're a DJ when you say you're a DJ. Who's to say that you're not? I think that there's a lot of gatekeeping too, where people are like, snobby about it. But the truth is that I think if you feel it in your heart, and I think about all the people that did it before me that I look up to, none of them did it to be famous. They all did it because they loved it. It was a passion. So that's what I look to when I pick music that I think is important to me. And I always say that if you're listening to music and you can't cry, then you're doing it wrong. So I always listen for the candy, so to speak, and I try to express myself that way. I think in order to achieve longevity, you have to just do what's in your heart. Don't focus so much on what's on social media. Because if we do that, myself included, you get kind of crazy. Somebody said to me, it was a great thing. They said, compare despair. So if I'm constantly looking on social media as to what this person's doing, that person's doing, then I'm wasting a lot of time and energy and not really focusing on my craft and music and what's important to me because social media is an absolute necessary evil right now, but it's also a curse too. It's designed to sort of create an insecurity, right? To create FOMO, to create, I'm not good enough, or I wasn't there, or look at what that person's doing. The reality is that the only thing that makes you good is the passion to go find music, the passion to play music so people can enjoy it. I think that even with people who are technically really good, I know DJs that are unbelievably good that can't hold a room. So what does that say? That to me, that says that there's a balance. When you're hired or when you're at a place and you're playing, I always try to think like, I want to play a few things that I love, but I want to make sure people are having a good time. Ultimately, that's why people ask me to play. You can't just come into a room and totally alienate everybody on the dance floor either. You're there people want to have a good time, especially if you're out on a Saturday night, right? You want to think about it. I think that there's a lot of focus on, how many followers you have, what your reach is, where you played the last time, who you played with. I don't focus on that. I just do, and I don't chase gigs either. I don't do that because that also contributes to that part of like, feeling that you're not good enough or feeling that, you're not. I think you just keep your head down, you do your work, and eventually, it took me years to get to where I'm at. a lot of failing, a lot of not knowing what to do, a lot of losing money. And then when I started to play, paying attention to what was going on the dance floor and watching people, like basic stuff, like watching my levels on the dance floor, and being open. If somebody tells me I'm playing too loud, turn it down. Francois K I remember I was playing one time, it was like Luciello, or somewhere, he came and he turned it down. And I was like, okay. But then he also told me it's important to go listen on the dance floor. And stuff like that is like, you can't buy that lesson. Nobody can tell you that, you experience it. I think, I've played 718 sessions a few times for my birthday, and those are great, usually. That's kind of where I first started. I would do that once a year. And then kids around Brooklyn started asking me to do a little more. And 718 Sessions is a great place because it's about music. And it's really community, a community that sort of created itself. So when I play there, I'm playing for my family. When I'm thinking about what I'm gonna play there, and believe me, I'm thinking about what I'm gonna play there because I play it once a year. I think about what I'm gonna play at 718 Sessions the whole year. I'm planning for that day. I know that when I play a record or a track and I lower the music and the whole 1,000 people are singing it, I know that I did my job. I picked the right song. So those times where I played at Output, on the main floor of Output, I always felt like, and I didn't do it that much, but I played it, a handful of times. And I always felt like that was like driving a Ferrari, as opposed to just a regular booth. When I got in there, I just felt it. I was like, whoa, there's a difference, right? And I think another memorable time was when I opened up for Danny Teneglia at Stereo Montreal. That was very special. I was nervous. And the owner of the club actually stood by me the whole night, which made it worse. But I'll never forget that moment. That's a great question. I think that how I'm inspired, you're right. I find inspiration from many things. It can be a good book. It can be a track I've heard. It has to somehow resonate. And I have to have an emotional response. That is the inspiration. I was around a lot of art as well. So I kind of look for images, I look for photos, there's certain things that make an impact in your subconscious. Sometimes you don't even realize it. But for me, it's sort of, I might hear a track that I don't necessarily love, but there might be a word or a phrase in it that will sort of play in my head over and over and over and over. It almost feels like I can't get it out of my head. And that's inspiring me because what it's doing is it's touching me in an emotional place, regardless of whether I'm playing from a DJ booth and I have to connect with the music, and like I said, not all music is meant to connect that way. But I'll give you an example. I played, a memorable gig that I didn't talk about. I played Carry Nation at Good Room. And that was one of the best gigs ever for me. I found this old Bjork track. What was it called? Anyway, it has a line in it that said, it takes courage. And I had that in my head over and over. It takes courage. I played it. It went over really well. But as I was preparing for that particular show, which was really important to me, I wanted to connect to music that meant something to me. So playing that song over and over, and I even said this to them afterwards, every time I listened to it, I must have listened to that track in my car like 50 times. But every time I connected with it differently. And it brought me to a different place, emotionally, Also producing music. I'm producing a little bit. I want to write songs. Anybody can write a track, in a technological way, right? You can learn Ableton or you can learn Logic but writing a song and having it come from the heart is different. And to me, that's kind of what I look for, when I'm connecting to music and what inspires me. And also what inspires me these days is the younger generation. There are so many great new DJs around that are just so talented, and sometimes when I go out and I listen to them, which by the way, this is my plug for Mad Radio. What I love about places like Mad Radio is that it is a platform for younger DJs that aren't necessarily gonna get a chance right away. And I should say that if you're a younger DJ that's not playing a big room, maybe you get to do it once in a while, or maybe you never get to do it all. That doesn't mean that you're a failure. That just means it's to me, that and this, for example, are two different things. It's the young people. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you how old I am these days, but I mean, I'm not gonna do it forever. I'm not. It's just impossible. I wish I could. But the reality is that what a lot of young people are bringing to the table now is so amazing. They're so talented. And the reality is that as the older generation, for me, it's super important to be a mentor to some of them. And I totally encourage people. I totally tell people, go out and get it. I'm not into gatekeeping. It's like, do your thing, go out. You can't succeed if you don't try or if you don't ask. Or, the worst thing you can get is a no, right? And then you try again. And don't be afraid to, often fear is the biggest obstacle. Like sometimes, right, when you're playing, the track you're afraid to play the most that night is the biggest one. It's happened to me over and over. The one that I'm like, oh man, I don't know about this one, and then I take a chance and boom, that's the one people remember. It's the same thing with music production, right? Once you do a track, you gotta play it. I've been going through that recently. I made some music and I send it out. I played one of my tracks last night for somebody who's very influential, who's a mentor of mine, who's made incredible music and is a legend. And they said, the music is terrible. The music sucks. He said, but the song is great. And I was like, I'll take that, for one of my first tracks. So it's about more conquering that fear. And when I played it for them, I sat in the car and I just looked straight ahead and I thought, just don't react. Whatever he thinks is what he thinks. It's putting music out into the world, right? It's like like putting your baby out. What it does once you put it out takes a life of its own, or it doesn't, and doesn't mean you failed. Fear is, it's sort of like, if you don't check it, it's like a parasite that sort of can take away all creativity, I know people that make tracks that have 50 tracks at home and they'll never see the daylight because they're too afraid to let anybody hear them. Like, well, what are you making tracks for? But getting back to that story, this DJ gave me this file and he said to me, this file I gave you, he said, with this file, you can play the biggest festivals all over Europe. I'm giving you my set. And I was totally impressed. I was like, why are you giving me this? I mean, this is unbelievable. Like, It was like literally over 100 tracks. And then he said, well, first of all, you have to know what to do with them. And then he said, it was the most humbling thing. He said, but you're not gonna play them like me. And I was like, wow. First of all, I was like floored that he said that. Because it was not arrogant, but he was so sure of who he was and what he does that he was like totally unshakable. You know, I was like, I learned something. Sometimes, you know, somebody may have the music, but it's how you play something sometimes and how you present it that, you know, so getting over the fear is practicing that when you're up there. Because people are really good. You can practice at home all you want. I rarely practice at home. I have my stuff, but I just don't. Because a lot of times even what I prepare is not what ends up happening, you know? And everything, and I hear this from all the old school guys, because everything's so many files now. Sometimes you prepare stuff and then you can't find a track that you really wanted to play. You're just like, so I try to have like an outline of what I'm going to do. And generally speaking, I don't stay there. I think instincts develop. You know, you learn to trust yourself a little more. The other thing I've learned is when you're bringing in a track, every mix, sometimes things aren't perfect, you know, so the show must go on. You know, it's kind of like that was an important skill. Like, especially sometimes you mess up, you know, or the recovery is more important. Because people don't usually remember that. Usually what they remember is the song, the music. You have a lot of chin scratchers that hang around and they're like, you know, checking you out. But I think that that instinct of moving past perfection, because I'm the guy that can go home and I might have had a great set, but there could be one person that I see standing in the corner who's not looking happy, and I'll focus in on that person. Because I'm like, you know, why aren't they dancing? And that takes a long time, that awareness to realize that I'm focusing in on the wrong thing. Or also when I go home, right? You know, playing people for music is a very isolating experience. And I heard that from a lot of, you know, the legends that tour a lot. And when you finish playing that set and you go to the hotel, you're alone with your thoughts and you're set, and now you played. The other skill I think I've learned is just to be more forgiving to myself, be more gentle, be more like, sometimes it's, you know, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. It's okay. Or that track didn't work so well. Or, you know, shutting that voice off when I'm alone, that is a skill. Because, you know, I can be my worst critic. I'm my own worst enemy. As an artist, as a creator, as somebody who's trying to express themselves, you know, which is kind of counterintuitive or if you think about it, right? You're trying to express yourself, but then you're hard on yourself for not getting it perfect. It doesn't make sense. But I think I'm not the only one that does that. I've heard that from almost all DJs, that some of them are hard on themselves after they play a set. First of all, I don't ever want to approach it feeling like cocky about it. It's a privilege, right, to get booked anywhere, because there's so many DJs that just want to get the opportunity to play. They'll play for free. So to get asked to play anywhere and be paid a little something. I remember the first few times I got paid, I would get paid like, it was peanuts, but I was so delighted. I was like, oh my God. I'm still laughing because I was like, I can't believe somebody's paying me to do this, you know? Especially because I paid DJs for so many years. So I think that I practice a lot being humble, right? Because it's a privilege. They are coming here, they are paying, they are buying drinks. They are the people that support the business. You know, they're not lucky that they get you. You're lucky that you got them. Unless you're somebody like Carl Cox or Mochak or whatever, one of these big guys that can sell out, The reality is you're doing a job. And I think it's important to keep that up front, and what you do. It's hard. Sometimes somebody will lean over and say, do you have this? Can you play that? That's hard. Sometimes I'm like, no. And then sometimes I just go, Benny, slow down, be nice. There's different levels, right? People come in, there's people that are just here to dance on a Saturday night. They don't know what the hell's going on. They don't even know who you are or what this place is about. They're just here. So I try to be how I would like to be treated. That's how I try to be in the world when I'm out there. Being a place like Mad Radio, you're new here in the city, but you can sort of own who you want to be, right? Pretty early on. And I think that, a place like this has the opportunity to really sort of embrace the community. You can be intentional somewhat, but the opportunity is really there for you. It has a great sound system. It's a cool place. And just from being here a couple times and playing here a few times, the vibe can be great. It's a small room, but not everybody wants to be in a big giant rave every week. That takes a lot of energy. Sometimes you just want to go out to a neighborhood place and hear your buddy play, or see some friends. I think that Mad Radio, from what I've learned and what I've seen so far, has this sort of great opportunity to create and nurture, people that might be going to the next level, or who are just exploring, or, in keeping and having patience with yourselves too as Mad Radio. You're growing too. You're new. You're gonna make changes. You're gonna do things. Everybody has an opinion about how you should do something. And you'll take some of those, and some of those you'll grow into in your own time, right? You can't be everything for everybody. You can't make everybody happy. Before it was Mad Radio, it was TVA. It was a much loved local hangout. And I think that Mad Radio has, really taken the opportunity to make the space so much better. And so much, the sound is great here. I think you can sort of set yourself up to be that place for a lot of young people, new people, and some of us older people too. What being a mentor means, I think, and what I've learned in nightlife is, I think sometimes you have to take time. It's really about making time, right? It's about taking that phone call. Sometimes it's, there's the business part of it, which is you might take a phone call for somebody who's trying to just figure it out. We don't talk about, in nightlife, we don't talk about mental health enough. It really is an important aspect of what we do. Because, we're here at night, when the lights are dim and everybody looks great, but how are people really feeling? So what I do is I try to take a moment, even if it's a moment. And I talk to somebody. I'm busy, we're all busy, but sometimes taking a phone call, and believe me, I get a lot of them, and saying, hey, what's up? 2 minutes. I'm like, don't give up, try hard, keep going. What did you do? What did you do wrong? And I demystify it for people. It's like promoting. It's not brain surgery. You know, a little elbow grease, hard work, and if you fall, then you stand up and you do it again. You know, I always say, run your numbers. It's really easy. You know, if you're doing a party, for example, it's a room for 100 people. And you're gonna book a DJ. How many people is it gonna take to pay that DJ, to pay your staff, to pay, you know, don't spend $5,000 on a 100-person room. You know, you're never, you know, it's unless you're booking, you know, a huge act that's gonna come and do you a favor and play that room. And so a lot of it is simple mathematics, simple common sense. And I think when people start, they get really excited. I made the same mistakes. You make blunders, you know, and then you learn also that one of the biggest things that I had to learn was that there's a balance between the venue and the promoter. And everybody has to succeed. If the promoters are the only ones succeeding, or the DJs, and the venue is not really, then how do you coexist? How do you help each other survive? You know, everybody has to do well. And that's why I think that, you know, in the politics of nightlife, you know, we're always wondering what this person's doing over there and with that. It's really, I always say it's important that we all succeed. Even if you don't like the people. Sometimes you don't like a person at another venue. I try to take my personal feelings, put my personal feelings aside, and objectively look at their work. You know, sometimes it's hard to be objective and to look at somebody's skill DJing or look at how somebody put together a space. But in taking my ego out of the picture and looking, and we end up helping each other. Like, I'm not gonna get into specifics, but over the summer we had some big stuff happen in New York where people, you know, certain venues failed. Not great for New York. You know, it's like, this is New York City. It's like, you know, if we all succeed, it's good for everybody.